My name is Dennis Brown, and this is my weekly Freight Broker Bootcamp live training. Today, I'm going to answer a question. Here's my notes. The question I get quite often is, should I prospect small or large companies as a freight broker startup? I've been getting this question quite a bit, never answered it formally in one of my live trainings, so we're going to break that down today. That's what we're going to do. But before we get into that, here's the agenda. We're going to do the training. And then at the end, we're going to do live Q&A. So if you stick around to the end, you can ask me questions about this or other topics related to freight broker training, freight broker startup, freight broker sales, marketing, whatever it is you're looking to do. I'll do my absolute best to try to answer those questions for you. In the meantime, do me a favor, hit me up in the comments with the city and state you're logging in from. We'll do some shout outs and then we'll jump right into the training, okay? Because I've got a lot of notes to go over. You can see them here. Welcome, Renee. Welcome, Betty from Raleigh, North Carolina. Hit me up. Let me know the city and state you're logging in from. I'm in the Buffalo, New York area, to be exact, Clarence, just outside of Buffalo, a little suburb outside of Buffalo. Lifelong resident here in Western New York. Tell me where you guys are from. Renee's in Rochester. Welcome. We'll have a bunch of people jumping in here live shortly, whether that be through YouTube or LinkedIn or through Facebook. I appreciate you guys being here. I know the middle of the day is sometimes challenging, but it's the best time for me to consistently show up for you guys every single week and do these free live trainings. So if you guys enjoy these free live trainings, if you want me to continue these free live trainings, do me a favor right now, hit the like button no matter where you're at. I'll show up every Monday. I'll give as much as I can give. And then hopefully you guys can take that and parlay that into some opportunities for you in the coming weeks and months. So again, here we go. Corey from Billings, Montana. Welcome. Corey's always here. Renee's been here a lot. Betty's always here. So we got a lot of regulars. Where's everybody else? Talk to me. Where are you guys at? We normally have people from Europe and India and South America and Canada. We have people from all over the country. Matter of fact, in my Freight Broker Bootcamp startup program, that's the startup program for freight brokers and freight agents. I trained well over 10,000 students, but I did a count not long ago, and I think it was 16 different countries that I've had students from, which is pretty amazing. Kind of blew my mind when I first heard that. Now, again, it's been over a decade since we've had that program, and we've been very, very blessed. We're well known to be the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker, freight agent training program for startups. So if you guys are curious about that, you can check it out. Zoran from Macedonia. There we go. Another country I heard from. Joe Mighty from Florida. Some think that might be another country. Simon from Nashville. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Simon's wearing the Freightpreneur shirt. Someone who solves problems you don't know you have in ways you can't understand. I've given away hundreds of these, and Simon was one of the winners, so Simon's wearing it. Awesome. All right, so we're going to get started in just a minute. And again, we got a lot of notes to go over. Today, I'm going to be answering that question that I get quite often and that you might have thought about yourself as a freight broker startup. Should I be prospecting small companies or larger companies? And I'm going to kind of break that down for you. This is going to be a short training, but it'll be important because I'm going to tell you a quick story. And then at the end of this, I'm going to give you some tips, not only on who you should be prospecting, but how to build a list and start doing outreach to them. Okay, so that's going to be kind of a little bonus at the end if you stick around to the end. Welcome, Jasir from Philadelphia. Welcome, Alexander from Chicago. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. Okay, cool. So let's make sure I got my ducks in a row. And we should be good to go. I think the mic is set. All right, very cool. Well, listen, thank you guys for being here. Today, I'm going to share with you a very, very important question. The question I get quite often, and that is this: should I prospect small or large companies as a freight broker startup? Should you be going after large companies or smaller companies? What's the right answer? Well, here's the reality. There is no right answer, but I'm going to share with you some of my personal experience. And I'm going to share with you some of the experience of the students that I've taught over the years that have built 6 and 7 and 8-figure freight brokerages. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. But before we get into that, okay, I'm going to tell you a quick story. The story is about the first shipper I ever got as a freight broker back in 2003, 2004 when I launched my business. I remember it was a local niche furniture manufacturer in the Buffalo, New York area that made kind of high-end office furniture. And at the time, I think they were probably doing maybe around $5 or $10 million a year in sales. They were a relatively small company. And, we moved a load from Buffalo down to New York City. And I remember the anxiety and I remember the entire sales process. I remember everything about it. And, we made 100, 150 bucks on the load, but that really wasn't the point. It wasn't really about the money. What it was about was the lessons that I was able to learn, right? The lessons that I was able to learn about that sales process, the lesson I was able to learn about moving that first load. And eventually, we went on to do business not only with small companies, but medium-sized companies and even large companies. Some of the largest companies in the world like US Steel and Unilever and Nestle and John Deere and some really large brands. So we did business with a whole bunch of companies in a variety of different sizes and industries over the course of that company before I sold it. And even today, that company continues on and is one of the top 100 freight brokers in the country. But here's the thing. Here's what I want you to understand. As a freight broker startup, I'm going to give you some of my experience, and I'm going to give you a little bit of feedback and a little bit of a framework that you can follow in order to get started, all right? Because most of you here are either looking to become a freight broker, freight agent, or you're new to the freight broker, freight agent game. And this applies to both brokers and agents. So here's what you're going to do. My suggestion, and what I have seen proven work the most often, is focusing in on small to medium-sized companies. Now, let me try to define that for you. Now, in the manufacturing space, if you are looking at small to medium-sized companies, small companies are typically companies that are doing anywhere from zero up to, let's say, $50 million a year in revenue. That's a small company. I know that seems like a lot, but that's considered a small company. And then medium-sized companies are typically companies that are doing anywhere from 50 million up to maybe $1 billion in sales. And again, that seems very large. And then large companies are doing $1 billion plus. That gives you a little bit of a framework of how most people think about small, medium, large. And that should give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about today. So my suggestion to you is to start with small to medium-sized companies and work your way up. And when I say small, you can't be too small. You can't have a manufacturer that's doing 100,000 or even 200,000 or 500,000 or even $1 million in sales. That's a very small company. So what I suggest is focusing in on smaller companies that are doing maybe somewhere in the $5 to $10 million range as a minimum, all the way up to, again, large small companies, which is about $50 million in sales. Now that's group one. That's group A. So from 5 to 10 million up to 50 million. Those are the small companies you're going to want to go after. Now, you can also go after medium-sized companies that are doing maybe somewhere in the range of 50 million, but I wouldn't go all the way up to $1 billion. I would probably try to focus in on something less than $500 million in sales. So if you look at those groups combined, it would be someone that's doing about $5 to $10 million of sales and is all the way up to maybe $500 million, $500 million in sales. So that would be the revenue basis. Now, if you can't target it by revenue, a lot of times that's difficult. You can target it by employee size, the number of employees. So when you look at manufacturing, most manufacturers in the US average out to do about $200,000 in revenue per employee. Okay. So I'm not very good at math, but if you looked at a company that was doing $10 million a year in sales, and you divide that by 200,000, that's 50 employees. Okay. So if you had a company that was doing, say, 50 employees, and let's say the upper end of that range is 500 million divided by 200,000, that's up to 2,500 employees. Okay. So you could see, let me do that math again. I want to make sure that's correct. 500 million divided by 200,000. Yeah, that's 2,500. So you'd be looking for companies that were between 50 employees, up as high as maybe up to 2,500 employees. That would be your small to medium-sized companies. Now, I would start on the smaller end, okay? And the reason why I like to start on the smaller end and work your way up is Number one, smaller companies are easier to navigate the sales process. All right. There's less complexity to the sales process and onboarding process as a new vendor. They're more approachable, right? There's less competition because everybody goes after the big companies, right? And it allows you to practice. It allows you to practice without burning huge opportunities, right? Because again, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. And you'd rather blow it with a company that's doing $5 million in sales than a company that's doing $1 billion or $1.5 billion in sales, right? So those are some of the reasons why I like to start on the smaller side. The other big reason is that there is a higher demand. Number one, there's way more small companies than there are large companies. I know you may find that hard to believe because you only hear about the big ones, but there are exponentially more small companies that are doing 10 million to $500 million than there are companies that are doing $500 million to, and up, right? So yeah, so number one, there's a lot more targets. Number two, there's a lot more need. Small companies need freight brokers and freight agents more than larger companies. Now, why is that? Well, larger companies have more resources. Larger companies like to bring a lot of talent inside and control it. Smaller companies are going through a growth curve and they want to ramp up, and they have a harder time attracting top talent, and they have a harder time scaling. So they like to outsource in order to scale. So that's where being a freight broker, freight agent, stepping in and working with these small to medium-sized companies can have a huge, huge advantage. Okay, so those are some of the reasons why. So now, listen, stick around because I'm going to share with you a 3-step process, a very simple 3-step process on how, after you've identified your niche and you want to make a list of these small to medium-sized companies, how you can build that list and then start doing outreach and start connecting with those prospects. Okay, so step number one, very simple. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to check out apollo.io. You can sign up for a free account at, let's see what it is, freightbrokerbootcamp.com/free leads. Let me pull it up on the screen. freightbrokerbootcamp.com/free leads. You sign up, all you need is a credit card, or all you need is an email. You don't need a credit card. You can sign up and you can get access to the Apollo database. You can then start searching that database by industry and the number of employees and the geography and all the different variables, okay? It's one of the best tools out there that I've seen for freight brokers to generate a list of their target niche, okay? So that's step number one. You go to apollo.io, you sign up for a free account through my link, freightbrokerbootcamp.com/free leads. That is a partnership link. And so I want to be fully transparent about that. It doesn't cost you anything more. And if you sign up through that link, you do not need a credit card. Okay. All right. So that's step number one. Step number two, once you've compiled that list, what you're going to do with each one of those companies, prior to reaching out to them, you're going to go and do a little bit of research. You're going to go to their company website. You're going to go to Google. You're going to go to LinkedIn, and you're going to gather some sales intelligence. You're going to gather a little bit of data, a little bit of information that you can then use as a way to educate yourself and to reach out to that prospect and find a way to be different, okay? Because that's really important, okay? And then the last part is you're going to start reaching out to them through email, through phone, through LinkedIn, through face-to-face, whatever medium that you choose. I would recommend using a variety of all of those different strategies. And you're going to start reaching out and having conversations with those prospects, okay? The key here is you want to find a way to be different. And that's what people struggle with. You don't want to sound like every other freight broker out there. So for those of you that are struggling with that, and you need help, and you need a mentor, and you need a coach, and you're looking for somebody that can help you with that, okay, and help you go get through navigate that process, you need to check out my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. That's the link where you can get on the wait list. That's where I take this piece of my brain, I transplant everything into your head, my favorite sales strategies, tactics, tools, but most importantly, my entire freight broker sales system that allowed me to do over $200 million as a broker. And more importantly, has allowed many of my students to go out and build 6 and 7 and even 8-figure freight brokerages on their own, using the strategies and frameworks that I share in that program. Now, that is a coaching program. Again, it's not just an online course, it's an actual coaching program. So it's typically sold out, but occasionally spots will open up. If you get on the wait list, you'll be the first to be notified when new spots open up. And at that point, you'll be considered and possibly will invite you into the program. So again, you can get on the wait list at freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist. All right. So listen, appreciate you guys being here. Listen, if you guys are just in the startup phase and you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, and you need somebody to kind of connect the dots A to Z, you're a little bit confused, maybe you got some conflicting information on YouTube and you got some conflicting information on TikTok and you're not sure who to believe. Again, I've done over $200 million as a freight broker, trained over 10,000 students in 16 different countries, and we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money back guarantee. So if you're curious about that, you can check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you hit the like button, comment below with any questions you have, and I'll see you next week on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Okay, cool. So for those of you that are going to stick around, okay, for those of you that are going to stick around, hold tight. I'm going to do Q&A. Hold your questions for just a minute so that I don't lose them, okay? And we will jump into that Q&A in just a minute. Ricky, how are you, buddy? Good to see you. All right. Cool. All right, listen, we're going to try to get through this as quick as we can. But first of all, answer me this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1, hey, this was an important question. Thank you for the answer. 1 to 10. 1 meaning, hey, this isn't anything that I was really interested in, didn't really help me. 10 meaning, hey, listen, this is perfect. I needed the answer to that question. You helped me navigate that. 1 to 10, low to high. Where am I, right? How do you rate this training? All right, that's what I'm looking for. And if you're anything below an 8, do me a favor and give me some constructive criticism on what I can do better, or if there's other topics that you want to hear about, right? That's, for me, I'm trying to hit the nail on the head. I'm trying to deliver for you every single week. And so the reality is sometimes that gets challenging after you've done 300 or 400 videos, okay? And I just want to make sure that you guys are getting what you need. Cool. Thank you. Jasir, Renee, Jomo, Betty, Vicky. Good. Awesome. And listen, if you guys didn't like it, tell me why. I'm all ears. I mean, trust me, my superpower, one of my superpowers is I have very thick skin, and negativity doesn't really impact me. Okay. And that's just kind of one of my superpowers. So as long as you're constructive, we'll be fine. Just give me some constructive feedback. I'd love to hear it. Okay. All right, cool. Awesome. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. All right, so let's jump into Q&A. All right, let's jump into some Q&A. Let's see. Simon says, this is a question that I didn't even know I had. I'm sure glad we covered it. Good. Awesome. Yeah. Where to start? Who do I call? What size companies? I mean, there's companies ranging all over the board. I'm glad it helped you, Simon. I really do. A lot of people don't really think about it, but I do get that question quite a bit into my instant messenger on Facebook. I get it via email. We get a lot of those questions. So, and I even get them in the comments here on LinkedIn. So thank you for that. I'm glad it helped. Question from Trucker Twits. How do you handle companies that take 4 months to pay? I don't handle companies that take 4 months to pay. That's the answer. Okay. Here's the rule of thumb. If a shipper cannot pay you in 60 days or less, I don't do business with them. That's just the way it is. Okay. I don't do business with them. You'll hear some people say, oh yeah, we wait 90, we wait 120 days. I don't do it. We're in too low of a margin business to try to lend shippers money for free for 4 or 5 or 6 months, because that's really what you're doing. By extending them credit, you're lending them money for whatever period you agree. So my suggestion is your credit terms should be 30 days or less. Now, when I was running my brokerage before we sold it, we probably averaged in the high 30s to low 40s for average days to pay. Okay. That means we had some customers that were paying us in 55 or 60. We had some customers that were delinquent and didn't pay us on time. And then ultimately we'd have to shut them off. And we had customers that paid us in 7 days, right? So when you blend that all together, the average days to pay were somewhere in the low 40s. But here's the thing, we had a very specific policy. If a shipper got to 60 days, they were put on credit hold, right? They were put on credit hold until they were able to catch up. And sometimes that's very painful when you're a small brokerage and you've got to say you've got 5 customers and you got to put your biggest customer on credit hold or your second biggest customer on credit hold because they're not paying their bills on time. That's a problem. It's going to be a huge problem whether you're paying the carriers yourself out of your own pocket or if the factoring company's paying it, because factoring companies don't want to wait 3 or 4 months for their money either, right? And the longer they have to wait for their money, the more they charge. And eventually what happens is they will charge back on that if they don't get paid. And then you've got to come out of pocket for it, right? So you've got to be smart about your credit terms. I hope that helps. I went a little bit off course there, but I hope that gives you a bit of a framework. Shannon, should I have a lawyer on standby as a new broker? If so, recommendations, please. Shannon, I don't believe you need a lawyer on standby. I can tell you that in the 13 years that I had my freight brokerage, I hired my lawyer to help us with issues related to that. I would say maybe 3 or 4 times in 13 years. So it's not a daily, weekly, monthly occurrence. It's fairly rare, but it is probably a good idea to find a business lawyer, someone that focuses in on business. They don't specifically have to be a freight brokerage lawyer or a logistics lawyer or the transportation lawyer. Just a solid business lawyer that's local in your community, someone that understands business law, is probably all you need as a general rule. If it gets beyond that, then maybe you're going to have to find somebody who specializes in transportation law. But I'll be honest with you, and I don't have a recommendation. My recommendation to you would be find somebody local, okay? Someone you trust and you can meet with. All right, another question. Hey, Dennis, could you tell me who is more likely to have its own trucks? Wholesalers, distributors, or retailers? And how can I figure out about a particular company? Okay, so let me read that question again and let me think about it. Could you tell me who is more likely to have their own trucks? Wholesalers, distributors, or retailers? And how can I figure out about a particular company? Okay, so I don't have any hard data on this. I'm going to give you my gut, okay? So there's probably some validity to it, but I can't give you any hard data. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to give you my take. My take is that in most cases, you're going to have all of those different channels may have their own trucks. But I think that you will probably find more manufacturers and retailers that have trucks than wholesalers, but I could be wrong. That's just my personal experience. Now, how do you determine if a company has their own trucks? Well, the way you can determine that is you can search on the FMCSA by company name if they're a manufacturer to see if they have a DOT number. That's the easiest way to do it. Now, that might waste a whole lot of time because most companies, most manufacturers and retailers don't have their own trucks. Now, the very large ones do, like Walmart, right? They have their own fleet of trucks. They also outsource a lot too, right? So it's not like just because they have their own trucks. And just so you understand, just because they have their own trucks doesn't mean they don't outsource. I did business with lots of companies that had their own trucks, but they had more freight than they had trucks. And they didn't want more trucks, right? Because that fixed overhead is very expensive. Okay. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's my 2 cents. Okay. Renee says, I'm struggling with a banned line haul rate request. We aren't a carrier, so we give set band rates from 0 to 300 miles. Should I do it by local mileage rate? Renee, this is a really hard question for me to answer because I don't have enough specifics. Is it dry van? Is it full truckload? Is it something you're going to put in a straight truck? Is it one pallet or full truckload, or is it a half? I don't know the specifics, right? If it's full truckload, it's a little bit easier, obviously. If you're looking for more local, day runs. So if it's full truckload and you're doing under 300 miles, you're probably going to have a day rate regardless. You're going to have a day rate, which is, you're going to have to pay a truck. You can't pay a full truckload carrier, 75 or 100 or $200 to go 50 miles, right? Or because their load and unload might be off, right? So typically you're going to have to pay a day rate on full truckload. So you have to factor in what it's going to cost you. First of all, how long does it take to load? How long does it take to unload? And will that driver be able to get back and load or reload, or are they only going to be able to take one load a day? You got to factor that in. Okay. So there's no hard answer there. The other part of it is, that's the biggest things you need to figure out. How long does it take to load? How long does it take to unload? Will the truck be tied up for the full day, or will they be able to be reloaded with another load? In a lot of cases, these short hauls will eat up an entire day. So you're going to have to pay a day rate for whatever that truck equipment is, whether it be a straight truck or whether it be a 53-foot van or whatever the case may be. So I don't know the answer to your question, but I don't think that a mileage rate, a per mile rate is really going to work, particularly for full truckload. It'll be very hard to try to scale a per mile rate on something that's that short. So I hope that answers your question. If not, ask a follow-up. Cool. All right. Betty Jones, Dennis, I'm with OperaFi Factoring. You're welcome. I contacted my first shipper today. Once this video is over, I'll contact some more. Congrats. Okay, cool. Listen, if you guys are startups looking for a factoring company, if you're a broker and you're looking for a factoring company, you're a startup, go to this link, freightbrokerbootcamp.com/cashflow. Tom, the owner of OperaFi, is a good friend of mine, and he's going to give you a special deal. He will take care of you, right? Fill that out. He's one of the few factoring companies out there. We're in a very small group of factoring companies out there that will work with startups. Okay. So if you go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com/cashflow, you'll be able to fill out a form. He'll get in touch with you. You'll set up a meeting. He'll explain exactly what everything's about. But please, only if you're a broker, not if you're an agent, and not if you don't have your broker authority yet, right? He's not really, if you're looking for, you really need to have your broker authority. He can't help you unless you have your broker authority. Okay. So if you have your broker authority, then reach out to him. Cool. That's great news. I love to hear it, Betty. Thank you. Anonymous posts, if a potential shipper is very cheap, is there hope that you can make them change or no? Yes, sure. Sure you can. Here's the thing. Cheap is based upon the market. Cheap is subjective, right? What you think is cheap and what I think is cheap and what a shipper thinks is cheap are very different things. What you have to understand is, what is market rate? So I believe that you can educate shippers on what market rates are, and you can get them to increase their rate. But here's the key. I'm going to tell you the key. It's not the rate. It's trust. The more you want to charge, the more trust you have to have. The less you're willing to charge, the less trust you have to have. It's that simple. So if you want to be able to charge more, you've got to be able to, number one, justify more. And number two, you need to have more trust. So yes, you can educate shippers and get them to increase their rates in specific circumstances. Now, some companies are just more price centric. Now, here's what I won't do. I will not operate exclusively on price. I am more than willing to tell a prospect or a customer, if you're focused exclusively on price, I'm probably not your guy. But if you want to know why my customers are willing to pay me a little bit more, I'll be happy to answer that for you. Okay. So yeah, if they're focused exclusively on price, I don't work with them. But if they're focused on value and relationship and price is a part of that, well, of course I'm willing to work with them. And of course I'm willing to educate them. And of course I'm willing to entertain that. So I hope that helps. Yeah. So Renee, if it's flatbed, you're going to pay a mini. You're going to pay a day rate. Okay. You need to figure out what your day rate is, and how far they're willing to go. And you need to understand the average pickup and delivery times, because you're not going to be able to sell a 50-mile trip, right, on a flatbed. It's going to be very tough. Okay. Unless you're willing to pay them, right, a day rate. Because you got to figure, they got to get dispatched into the pickup location. They got to get loaded. Let's assume it takes a couple hours. They got to get to the delivery location. They got to get unloaded. That's a couple hours. Now, what opportunities are there left for them to be able to reload their truck? And do they have to deadhead back from where they just went to? So if they got to deadhead back 300 miles and they can't reload, do you see what I'm saying? That's the hard part. Question. As a drayage company, do I need insurance beyond the surety bond? I have a customer asking for COI. Okay, well, are you a carrier or a broker? I mean, you're saying you're a drayage company. If you're a drayage company, that means you probably own trucks, right? I mean, if you have a drayage niche and you're a broker, that's different. So please clarify that. Be more detailed if you could, and then I'll try to get that question answered. Okay, there it goes. She did clarify. Okay, so a drayage broker. Do I need insurance beyond the surety bond? I have a customer asking for a COI. Well, if they're asking for a COI, then you have to ask them, what type of insurance do you require? Right? A surety bond isn't insurance. A surety bond is a bond that protects the carrier, not the shipper. If a shipper's looking for contingent cargo insurance from a broker, then you need to know that. If they're looking for general liability, you need to know that. You need to ask them, what specific type of insurance do you require? Again, we're a broker. We ensure that our carriers have a minimum of 100,000 in cargo. We make sure they have $1 million in BIPD, bodily injury, personal damage, basically liability, truck liability. And so, but as a broker, you're not required to have any other insurance. But if your shipper has a specific insurance they require, you need to ask them that question. All right, cool. Awesome. Good questions. Listen, if anybody has any final questions, I'm going to wrap it up today. So if you got any final questions, hit me up in the comments. If not, I'm going to wrap it up. Appreciate you guys being here. Hope you guys enjoyed the lesson. Hope you enjoyed me answering that question. Should I prospect small or large companies as a freight broker startup? All right, let's see. Trucker Twits. I have a potential customer, but the only way I can get it is if I undercut everyone. Profit margins would be 7%, 3 loads a week, 2,000 miles. Would you do this? Probably. Yeah, I probably would. And here's why. I would gauge the bigger opportunity for that shipper. If that's the maximum opportunity there is, 3 loads a week, right? And there's no other lanes and no opportunities, I probably wouldn't do it. But, right, I guess it depends on the dollar value, but maybe I would. 2,000 miles. I mean, here, if you got 2,000 miles and you're paying, say you're paying a couple bucks a mile, that's $4,000. Yeah, I probably would. Yeah, because I'm not worried about the 7%. I'm worried about the dollar value. So if you're able to make $200 or $300 or $400 on a load, regardless of the percentage, it's still worth it. Okay. The higher the dollar value of the load, the lower the percentage is going to be, but typically the higher the dollar value of the margin will be as well. Okay. So that gives you a general rule. So let's say, for example, I'm going to give you another example. Let's say, for example, it was a $1,000 load, right? You were going to charge the shipper $1,000 and you were only going to make $50 on that load. I'm going to give you a different scenario, which is a harder question, but I think you'll appreciate this. So you're going to make $50 on a $1,000 load and it was running twice a week. Would I do that? The answer is yes. If the larger opportunity was going to allow me to grow that business. There's a strategy, and I'm going to do a training on it in the near future. It's called land and expand. Okay. So what you do is you take the strategy here is you take a small deal, a small opportunity within a bigger opportunity, which is a bigger, opportunity within that shipper. And then You make little or no money on that up front. You kind of cut your margins up front. And the objective is you build trust, you get your foot in the door, you start understanding how they move, you identify new opportunities over time in other lanes and other challenges they're having, and then you expand into those opportunities where you're able to make more margin on the back end. But the hardest part about getting a new shipper is building trust, okay, is that first load. Because the reality is this, only one of two things is going to happen if they give you a load, right? You're either going to pick it up and deliver it on time or you're not. If you don't, then you've become more of a problem than a solution. So their fear of what might happen is more prevalent to them than what could happen, okay, on the positive side. So they're more focused on the negative, what might happen, versus the positive that might happen. So building that trust and moving in the first few loads, even if you're not making any money or making very little money, can be a great way to build that trust and to work your way into other opportunities. Because the reality is this, if you go for several months and there's no other opportunities and you've been moving this freight for low margin or no margin, you could always exit, you could always step out, you could always try to raise your rates at that point and see if you're able to do it. And then you'd make a little bit more money in that lane. If not, if there's no opportunities, you could exit stage left and no longer do business with that shipper if you chose, right? But I love that land and expand model, and I'm going to do a little bit more detailed training on it in the near future. T. Landy, how do you get your days to pay and credit scored on the load board? Well, if it's the DAT load board, then they have their own credit. I think maybe it's trans credit. I think if it's DAT. If it's Truck Stop, then Truck Stop has their own credit days to pay. So it's not you that's submitting it. It's typically drivers or carriers that are submitting their days to pay. If you go on my YouTube channel and you search Build Credit Fast, I go through a training with one of my student success stories, Elio Longoria, who made over $7,000 in profit his first week. Now, that's not characteristic, and I'm not trying to promise you that. What I'm trying to help you understand is that he was able to get credit from shippers very quickly and build his credit from no credit on the load boards up to AB credit very, very quickly. So if you go through that training, he breaks down exactly how he did that. Okay? Love it. Perfect. All right, guys, listen, that's going to wrap it up for today. Listen, if you guys, here's my suggestion. I showed you that you guys should definitely sign up for the Apollo account, okay? The free account. That's a partnership. Again, they're a partner, and so they will pay affiliate commission if anybody ends up signing up for their paid services on the back end, but it's absolutely free and it costs you nothing to get started, including you don't have to put a credit card in, okay? But yeah, if you get on there, you'll be able to build a list of your target market based on company size, based on the number of employees, based on geography, based on the industry. And I think you guys will really find that a valuable tool. Appreciate you guys being here. Listen, I'm here every Monday at noon, right? Doing these free trainings. If you learned one thing in this training, if you got one nugget from this training, hit the like button right now. I truly appreciate it. Let other people know about the free live trainings I do every week. Appreciate you guys being here. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. And I'll see you next week on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live.